my first request to them when
That's great.
we sat on the table is like, we would like to work with something meaningful as a venue, as a location.
Yeah, I don't want a tent. No disrespect, but I don't want a tent.
Yeah, because
I don't want a super modern structure, with full glass and...
Now there's this definitely perception that it's important to invest also in what
to live
surrounds
amongst
you.
beautiful things.
Exactly. Yeah. The average time spent by a collector or visitor on a booth is 1.5 minutes, basically, per booth.
Is there any moment where you feel like you want to slow this down and you don't want to be in a different city every week? Nicolas, welcome to Dubai Hills.
Thank you.
It is so nice to see you. I'm going to jump right in, if you don't mind, and we're going to go a little bit all over the place. But let's just start with Nomad before we even get into the Abu Dhabi edition. When you put this on, coherence is something you seek. But I mean, by definition, Nomad, I mean, it's a bit of a nomadic type of experiment. You go to different places. It's a bit of a pop-up. How do you reconcile whatever friction you find on the ground, especially when you first hit a new location, with the coherence you're trying to seek in terms of the actual exhibition and what the final product is?
Okay. Yeah,
yeah, I know. I'm going right off the gate. Right. Yeah. We'll back off after, but we'll start with the big guns.
Yeah. Well, let's say Nomad is the idea to go out of the classic fairs and, let's say, selling exhibitions who are normally being held in convention centers or tents. So the concept is really to create an experience for visitors to be able to find the right architecture to host an exhibition format where we invite galleries from all over the world to display their objects. We are mostly collectible design based, but we also host galleries doing contemporary and modern art, as well as high jewelry. So it is a sort of eclectic showcase, a sort of cabinet de curiosité, where we host exhibitors from all over the world. And the most important thing is always, the main focus is to really create this dialogue between architecture and the contents who are being exhibited inside.
By architecture, you mean the actual site?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. We can jump from like a palazzo in Venice to a monastery in Capri to a patrician house or an abandoned hotel or clinic in Engadine, close to St. Moritz, to a former terminal, which was a location in Abu Dhabi, this famous Terminal 1.
So just to get a bit more kind of granular, is it that you're offered these sites and then you're like, that's it? Or you're kind of not walking about, but you know what I mean? Kind of roaming around and then you're like, oh, this monastery would make a great... I mean, how does that dialogue start? And what are the signals you're seeking as the sort of curator?
We have some basic requirements in terms of space, in terms of square footage, in terms of layout, because sometimes you can find beautiful spaces. If it's just one big room, it makes it complicated, also for us to organize the show, especially to divide between the various exhibitors the space. So for us, it's important to find a space which has already a sort of natural division in different rooms. So because we don't like to build artificial divisions. For us, it's very important to
go what's there.
Exactly. That's always part of the experience, because you discover a place in daylight also, and, you can really understand the architecture somehow. Yeah. And this research is quite a long process because, yes, sometimes we're being offered a venue, but very often also it's a research that we do. If we're interested by a specific destination, then we start let's say the sort of hunting and research about like a venue. And this process can be sometimes, it can be very fast, but it can also be very slow and time consuming.
Do you know when you know? Is there a moment when you're like, this is it, I know?
Yeah. Once Yeah, I would say normally it's like, I don't want to say love at first sight, but almost,
Almost, yeah.
when you walk in a venue and you can definitely imagine like the journey of the visitor and where all the gallery would be displayed, it would work. Sometimes you need to have a vision also because the conditions of certain buildings we found were terrible. And obviously we had to go through a sort of reconditioning of the full building to make it viable. And sometimes we even did it in a construction site without any renovations, in a abandoned hotel that was like in the phase of first demolition before doing a new real estate project a couple of years ago in St. Moritz, for example.
And you have a number of constituents that you have to please. You have a landlord, typically, the host country or city or venue. You have your galleries, which are demanding.
Yeah.
And you have your customers who are walking through the doors. Those three constituents, you have to keep all in motion and you have to make them all happy. What comes first?
I mean, I don't think we prioritize.
No, I know you don't, but I'm curious.
But I mean, I used to be a gallerist myself.
Yeah.
Definitely it's easier to offer a certain type of service when you know
what they're looking for.
Exactly. And for me, it's always my priority to create something interesting for galleries, because after all, they are the ones who are following me all over the world. They are my main client also, because let's say the visitors are not my direct clients. They are the clients of the galleries at the end,
But I mean, is that, so for example, let's just use Abu Dhabi as an example. So you found this fantastic venue, by the way, congratulations. It was really beautiful and we were very happy to be a small part of it. What really struck me, which is so interesting, is how effortless and not trying too hard it felt. And I think a lot of this has to do with your own personal experience. You're not a novice to this part of the world. I mean, the Middle East and the Arab world. You've lived in Beirut. You've been all over the place for many, many years. And what's interesting is I have personally seen, exhibitions and openings and so on, where you bring in a concept and it feels like it's plopped on top of something, but it doesn't glide. This didn't feel like that at all. The venue certainly was a huge, I would say, coup in a way. But putting on top of that venue what you did, the galleries, the curation, it really felt to me, and I want to hear your experience, very easy. Do you feel like you're pulling this off because of these many years of experience and it sort of all comes together? I'm talking especially in the Middle East, right? Because in Europe, there are different challenges. But this was your first stage in the Middle East with Nomad. So were you pulling from that, from that experience or no?
That's an interesting question. I was not really worried about the success of the event. I thought maybe it was going to build up maybe in a at a slower pace.
It built up in a storm.
But it was an immediate success almost, which was like great, obviously. And because sometimes, obviously, you don't realize that maybe what you gather in terms of experience. And obviously I've been doing different projects in the region, but obviously not only in Lebanon where I had a gallery, but also I did great exhibitions in Qatar, in Saudi as well. And I was also part of the fair, the Design Days Dubai for many years, between 2012 and 17. So, you sort of accumulate relationships and links, to the region individuals. And when it's time to activate all of this network and to reach out, I think it feels more natural because you know many stakeholders, from the place. And when everyone gathers, you realize that obviously it's not people that you don't know, and you invite everyone to come out of nothing. That's the interesting thing.
But I have no doubt, and I'm curious to hear from you, that some of your clients, some of your gallery clients told you, we came before, maybe it was 5 years ago, maybe it was 7 years ago, maybe it was 8 years ago. Let's be very honest, it was probably too early. They probably said, we don't know if the region is ready. Europe fine, St. Moritz fine, Venice fine. I don't know. How did you counter that? Because I'm sure that was a conversation that you've had. And let's be very honest, collectible design up until Nomad, in my view, honestly, was hard to pull off. We've had a few attempts. They were okay, but you can't really say that it was, a resounding success. This is, at least for someone who's been here, certainly in Dubai or the UAE for the last 20 years, this is the first time when I was like, okay, this is working. How did you counter that argument, if that argument was had?
No, definitely it was an argument that was probably the most, the main point.
And fair point, right?
Definitely for all of the galleries coming, except maybe the ones who are based here. You know? But many of them trusted, let's say, the momentum and the fact, obviously, to come with a platform like Nomad also was for them a way to ensure, like, not the success of, let's say, the exhibition, but like also they trusted somehow a platform.
Have they mostly been with you throughout this journey? Most of the galleries?
Yeah. But also maybe 2-3 new galleries who were not from the region who came, but they knew about Nomad and they were interested to explore a new market. And I think it was also, there's a sort of fatigue a bit in Europe at the moment from, let's say, perspective of economy and let's say many European dealers are looking at new markets. And I think if you look globally on what's happening in the news with also the coming of Art Basel and Frieze in the region, it shows that this year will be a very important and turning point for the region in terms of collecting, in terms of importance in the art market. And I'm glad we arrived slightly before as Nomad, because I think it positioned us also in quite an interesting position. And I think this was definitely a new beginning somehow also for the region. I feel that it was a milestone from my perspective, not only because for Nomad itself there, but also for what's happening in the UAE and in the region. I think it was just like a sort of final step up to say, okay, now it's like a major league,
Do you feel that it was just a matter of time? I mean, what made it work now? Because you're right. I mean, you're coming a tiny bit earlier than the rest of the kind of major names. They're all coming now in 2026. You were a little bit early. It was a huge success from all perspectives. But what made it work in 2025 versus 2012? Was it the time element? It just now is the right time for the region? Is it a maturity that just that's the process and it just takes time?
It's combined factors. For sure, there was an educational process that started in 2012 onwards. And then, obviously, I think there's a regional context. Obviously, I think like when you see exhibitions like the Doha Design Biennial, this brought also sort of awareness to the region, because I think the way they position it was very interesting in terms of collectible design perspective, because they really put a spotlight on collectible design from the region for these exhibitions. And on top of this, the economical context in the UAE was fundamental. That's why I chose also Abu Dhabi and the UAE as a main base, because obviously since COVID, the economy shifted completely towards the country. And you have not only locals, or let's say the population that was here pre-COVID, but you have also a new wave of very interesting international residents coming from India, from West Africa, from
everywhere.
Russia, you know.
It became a global hub, which it was in 2012.
The geopolitics reshaped completely the population here, and you have a population which is here to stay, who's investing in real estate at levels that
you haven't seen before.
Exactly. I think it's natural if you acquire a property of a certain value, you won't go to IKEA to put furniture in it. It's like it comes with a build up, let's say, of like this global moment happening here. And I think also, they have the interior design firms who came here to establish themselves. You have more and more galleries coming in. I think even Design Miami, I don't think they will come here next year.
Absolutely.
In Al Cercal is also quite a statement. So I think all of this shows, let's say, how the market has shifted in the past few years, definitely. And especially Abu Dhabi, with the momentum that the city has in terms of like culture, the way they invested also in such discreet, I would say, at the same time, even if obviously they have like mega structure with superstar architects who build all of this museum bowl. I think they have a very strong strategy that has been implemented since 15, 20 years. And we see now the results of these investments, because at first people thought it was just going to be the Louvre, like a big museum opening there. And it was difficult to understand the full strategy around it.
Did you I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm curious. Did you discover the venue or did they offer you the venue? Because the venue was spectacular. I mean, that contrast was something I have not seen in the region. And I mean, I think Nomad was a big success for many, many reasons, but that really was the end, walking in there. It just sort of, was a game changer. Were they like, well, we have this airport that's decommissioned and here, or were you like, oh, I want this?
Well, it's not black and white what happened here.
I know.
It was quite a process. I think it was a conversation over 6 to 8 months with DCT, which is the Department of Culture and Tourism of Abu Dhabi.
And they must have been a bit skeptical, even after they offered the venue, that this would work, right? Would imagine.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think they didn't know really what they were getting into. I mean, they liked the concept on paper of what was Nomad, what happened in the past, and they loved the idea. My first request to them when they sat on the table was like, we would like to work with something meaningful as a venue, as a location.
Yeah, I don't want a tent. I mean, not that, no disrespect, but I don't want a tent.
Yeah, because
I don't want a super modern structure, with full glass, and which would have, I think that set the tone.
Exactly. And I think they were surprised by, in general, by this request to say, oh, so you would like to do something in one of our modern heritage buildings? Because they have a website where everything is listed. That's where it started from.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So and I explored, and you have like beautiful buildings actually from the 70s, 80s who are classified. And so at the first meeting, I said, I've made this selection of like 5, 6 buildings I've seen, but I don't know if they are available as venues.
They work as venues, if they have the square footage.
Can we visit them? And I said, of course. So they gave me a list, basically, and they printed all of the different venues they have. And they told me, okay, we'll organize site visits. You can start your research. So I did many trips to Abu Dhabi to explore every time different buildings and to understand whether it would be possible or not. And I was working on potential floor plans and venues of like how it could work. But I was never convinced about the different venues I was seeing. They were very interesting ones with great features, but it was always like a but. Because
what's the but? Generally, not even just about Abu Dhabi. What's the but in your
access, parking, delivery, the state of the building?
So practical things.
Yeah, very practical.
And this is probably also informed from your days as a gallerist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you kind of know from a gallerist perspective what you need.
Yes, yes and no. I mean, it was mostly my Nomad experience because obviously
over the last 9 years,
we've been doing it in over, 10, 12 different venues. Yeah. So now you understand when a space, the basic, let's say, ingredients to make it a success, what they are, so you go more with a focus when you explore this place.
And can you envisage this in several Arab cities over time, or do you feel like the differentiation point will be lost if you do that? Like, can we see I don't know, Cairo or Riyadh or Doha or, or you feel like, you'd kind of have one, and if it works, that becomes it. And then maybe you move on to Asia or, other places.
I think the focus here is mostly to find a strong regional point where to establish yourself as a base. We prefer to push on different continents somehow to create this collection of destinations. We have a new destination this year in the Hamptons. And so I think the first time I will go to America.
You can go to Sahel in Egypt. That's the new Hamptons, by the way. So just saying, but I'm plugging Egypt for a minute.
Yeah.
So you're going to the Hamptons. So, but it's a lot of those kind of resorty type of destinations.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting, because Abu Dhabi is not in that vein of St. Moritz and the Hamptons and so on.
I know. So, but it is, a little at the same time, because I think it's a sort of cultural resort destination somehow, Abu Dhabi. And I think that's why we felt it was more natural to come as a person. Obviously, for many people, it was natural to come to Dubai.
Yes.
But Dubai is a big city, and there were already things happening in the design field and so on. So we really wanted to create something unique.
Yeah. Did you feel the differentiation point would be more accentuated in Abu Dhabi?
Definitely. Yeah. I think because also Nomad is a destination after all. And the fact that we selected the airport in Abu Dhabi is definitely part of this destination process.
100%. From what you've seen this year and building on what you've seen, what would you do differently? What would be potentially in line for 26 that you would tweak or change, or maybe nothing?
I think obviously there were some details that we noticed more from an internal perspective, obviously, to improve as a journey. And I think the experience is fundamental of the term. I think we like the idea to push this idea of the journey of the passenger getting through. And this is something we'd like to enhance, because the engagement was incredible, with the boarding pass process
it's fantastic.
At the customs counters that we reactivated for the occasion. So I think all of these elements became such an interesting experience for visitors. So definitely we want to enhance this. But most important, and which was obviously my first objective here, is to work closely with Modern Heritage Department to bring back certain areas of the terminal to their original state, because a lot of the central part of the terminal has been cladded with white panels, or, to cover the original design with the mosaic tiles. We're under negotiation now, obviously, with the government and the different departments and the airport authorities. The objective is really to bring back the original design and to make it brief. Also, it will go back to the grandeur as it was before. And I think this is definitely the type of experience and that we want to do, and valorize also this fantastic architecture,
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit to you. So you grew up in Canada, correct? And you're kind of a nomad yourself, right? Because there's a bit of a nomadic element. And then you kind of been everywhere, really, quite frankly. You lived in Beirut, you lived in Milan. I don't know where you even live now.
Still in Milan. Yeah.
It's still in Milan. Okay, that's good. So it's not as nomadic as I thought. But what brought up this interest of leaving Canada and moving around? And you're going to walk me a little bit through post-studies, what prompted this experience of, and certainly I'm very curious about the experience in Beirut. What brought that about?
So I think since I was like very young. My parents were travelers somehow, we've been traveling since I was like 2, 3 years old. We did like long trips.
Were you an only child or you had siblings?
I have a brother.
Okay. Okay.
So we traveled all of the family together when I was a kid, a lot in Europe and the States mostly, and Central America. And then on my own also, as soon as I turned 16, 17, I was like going with my backpack and spending summers in Europe or Morocco or wherever I felt like going, And
was it just curiosity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally out of curiosity. I'd always had this fascination for traveling and also languages, discovering different cultures somehow, and had this high interest, obviously, for everything is around
architecture
design, architecture, visual arts. So for me, whenever I travel, it's also about discovering a local culture, meet the creatives, do studio visits. So it's all, let's say, coming together, I studied architecture and I decided that I didn't want to finish my studies in Canada. So I finished my bachelor in Venice in Italy. I learned Italian but then it was not enough for me. After Venice, I went to Berlin in Germany and I did a master degree in interdisciplinary creation there. And I stayed for 5 years in Germany, in Berlin. And then I went back to Italy, but I settled, let's say, a sort of base in Milan. And from there, I had many projects. I opened a gallery in Beirut.
How did Beirut come about? Beirut has always obviously had a very strong design tradition.
Yeah. I mean, it was, but I think when I opened a gallery, it was also quite an interesting trigger that happened in 2011.
Yeah.
Because in Beirut, back in the days when I went the first time, it was 2009. I think only Nada Dubus and Karen Shekarjan had studios, and there were no galleries. They were the only two designers of the city, basically. Not to reduce. There were obviously some architecture projects.
Yes, correct. These were
on
the
a global scale.
Yeah,
they were the only two designers who were known from Beirut, and that's it. It was a very early stage. It was nice. There was maybe Bokjaus having their shop in Saifi, but it was the reality. There were these three design realities, and that's it in the city, basically. But when I went, I thought it was so interesting, the culture for collecting and hosting and the way everyone really was proud of their interiors. And I thought there was a huge opportunity to open a design gallery in Lebanon. And I proposed to Pascal, my former business partner, when we had the gallery to open, and she said, yes, let's do it. And we started with a pop-up with Karim Begdash in Mar Mikhael when he was in Madrid Street in this beautiful venue. And we started there. Then we opened a permanent space in Jiffy North Center. And that's how everything started. And then we started to promote also and launch new designers and young talents from the region. So we started to work a bit with many of them. And then 2 years later, new design galleries opened. At a certain point, I think it was maybe around 2015, Beirut was like a very important center
100%.
for design. You had like 3-4 design galleries who were there. And so then
when no other Arab cities had even one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was, so also today, Shane Maghrabi also opened our foundation. And the scene was so vibrant that there were suddenly over 70, 80 designers who had their design studio in Beirut, which was incredible. In only 5 years, how the scene flipped completely. And then obviously around the world, like there was this sort of spread of Lebanese design across the world, maybe with like David and Nicolas were amongst like maybe also this new generation who really set the tone on a global scale, signing with international galleries.
Yes.
And then, but obviously the circumstances, obviously, of the economy and what happened in Lebanon, sadly, slowed a bit, shifted. But I feel and had to close, unfortunately, in 2019, the gallery there. But still, I think now there's a great energy coming back, and it's really exciting to see what they did for the design week. Mariana Werbe did a great job. So I think they're back on track, and I'm very excited to see what they will do definitely over there. But this was obviously a key experience for me in the region, and I loved my years that I spent in Beirut. It was really incredible, the meetings, and also the international designers that I brought there to do special projects in collaborations with craftsmen, I think, and many people came to visit us for the openings we were doing all year round. So I think it was a really vibrant platform, and that opened the doors to so many interesting projects and conversation in the region. And this led me also to Egypt, where in Nadrera Melal with Moner Nematala, I did also a great project of revitalization of Shali and Old Medina, and also at the hotel itself, where we collaborated on
What a fantastic venue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing what he's done there.
I think it's visionary, definitely. And India Madhavi also is a dear friend.
Yes.
That's how I landed there the very first time in the early 2010s. And definitely, I think Egypt is also having a moment now, I feel, which is great.
100%.
The different, and I think it's great to see this rise of like new realities in the region. And I think,
And what informed for you the move from gallerist, essentially, to, let's call it, curator of galleries? I mean, was it a conscious choice when you started Nomad?
I mean, when I started Nomad, it came out more as, how can I say, the desire to create a different experience than the usual fairs. Because obviously I took part for many years to the fairs in Miami, New York,
everywhere,
Basel, the
main
usual,
ones,
and Milan. And I thought there was always something that was missing in these big fairs, in these exhibition halls, that it was somehow always a missed opportunity to connect in a better way with the people you were meeting, because it was really transactional and fast. You had people coming for, they say the statistics of Art Basel or phrase that
48 hours.
I mean, the average time spent by a collector or visitor on a booth is 1.5 minutes, basically, per booth.
I did not know that.
So, which is crazy when you think about it, and, I really wanted to slow down this space and to say less galleries. So there's time to have a chat with everyone and bring it back to a more human scale, interactive, let's say, experience. If you go to St. Moritz or to Capri or any destination, or even to Abu Dhabi, if you book 5 days to Abu Dhabi, you love,
by definition, you slow down.
Exactly. And you go back maybe every day to Nomad to discover new things, or maybe for a nice dinner or lunch, and to interact with more people because you met, and it's also about meeting interesting people, because it gathers obviously people who share similar interests somehow, because you travel somewhere to discover art, design, and very special objects somewhere. And just this factor brings together very interesting people from all over the world. So maybe while you hear a conversation between a gallerist and a visitor, you can engage and say, oh, it's true, I saw this exhibition also last time I was in Paris or somewhere. And then you create an interesting new relationships,
But typically in a design fair, I suppose the theory is you have a white canvas, and then they chose these venues, which are typically pop-ups or tents or whatnot, so that the focus is really on the objects. Now, you're coming up with a different concept where there's a contrast, there's a dialogue, there's a conversation. How do you do it that those venues remain, as you did in Abu Dhabi, which you've done a fantastic job, But how do you do it that is interesting, but it doesn't overshadow the objects? Like, how do you create that harmony as opposed to a competition, which could happen?
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's a question of selection and
Selection of objects or selection of venues
uh,
of architecture?
both. In a way, I mean, the venue has been, once it's decided, you have to deal with it. Let's
Yes.
say.
Yes.
But I think it's a question of placement then of the galleries, because obviously when an exhibitor applies and or manifests interest to take part to Nomad, less or more I know their content. So let's say what kind of objects they normally exhibit and so on. So then there are also technical requirements, because some of them need to hang, I don't know,
Stuff.
chandeliers on the ceiling or this or that, or they have heavy pieces that can't be taken from the stairs, so it's different, let's say, parameters to take into consideration. But also I feel that the galleries or the guest curators, when they take part to Nomad, they also make an effort to curate their selection to generate a dialogue, within the context. And I think this makes it very special. Also the scale and the way it interacts and the fact that you have also daylight. I think all of these elements are something are quite surprising that you don't see normally in the standard fare, let's say, in a white cube, for example.
And what do you deem a resounding success over and above the overall satisfaction and buzz obviously create?
Obviously, it's at the end of the day, we are a commercial show. So the success of the galleries is important, but until a certain extent, because I think that the galleries, obviously, they're happy to come back with like sales that they cover the expenses, obviously, to travel and exhibit. But for many of them, it's a lot about creating relationships, with architects, interior designers, and with collectors, that they meet new people, and then they will invite eventually to come to their galleries and to continue the conversation, become like lifetime clients somehow. So I think there's also the long-term vision from the galleries when they take part to Nomad, which is very important because the relational is really high. That's this is the interesting thing, why the galleries, they love to take part to Nomad. It's to develop this relational thing, because we don't have so many galleries, so we can easily offer them activities to meet also collectors and so on, because we don't have 200 galleries. It's a bit challenging to host an intimate dinner with 200 galleries, let's say, plus the collectors and so on. So the good thing that we have normally 30 to 40 exhibitors is that it stays a sort of like a small community feeling, which is great.
And your audience is, how much is local versus travels for Nomad expressly? I'm sure it varies from site to site. But
definitely. In St. Moritz, foreigners is really important as in terms of numbers, because, the population of St. Moritz...
There's no St. Moritz.
Of course, but they are local residents, obviously, who are great clients because they have beautiful homes and chalet that and they always come every year to add some things to their collection, It's very difficult to define, let's say, demographics for all of the destinations, but we have a high traveling rate for sure everywhere we go. Maybe here we add obviously a strong UAE-based residence in Abu Dhabi, because obviously of the proximity, the novelty, and so on. But still, we had also many
visitors,
foreigners who came. But I feel this year will be
a lot more.
Sure.
Yeah. I think now you're on the map. I think maybe people are caught a bit by surprise. I feel the visitor ratio will go exponentially, and probably also for neighboring countries, because you've now kind of established this.
But we received so many messages also already for 26 of people inquiring how to book, when are the dates, and without even announcing yet, because obviously the location at the airport generated such an interest globally that I think we have many visitors who want to come just to relive this experience. So it's great.
What trends are you seeing in collectible design from the collector base that you've seen? I mean, globally, are you seeing a shift in trends? Are you seeing a shift in habits? Are people collecting sort of to kind of, let's say, beautify their homes? Are they collecting to be collectors the same way you're seeing it in art circles? What are you seeing?
Yeah, if we bring it to collectible design, I think there's not such a secondary market in the collectible design field. That's why primarily collectors or
End purchase.
architects, they really acquire for their own needs in terms of function, obviously, and also in terms of creating something that they would truly enjoy in their environment. And I think this is what is great also about collectible design. I think now there's this definitely perception that it's important to invest also in what
To live
surrounds
amongst
you.
beautiful things.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
how much you care to expose those clients to different markets. So in other words, if you go to Hamptons, would you take, like you did in Nomad in Abu Dhabi, Brazilian galleries or Brazilian designs, Sub-Saharan Africa, etc., or do you try to create a bespoke collection from their own market because of the familiarity?
I think we always try to include in the selection
Of all of that.
regional design and galleries, because it's very important to create a link with the territory. And also, I think it's also natural to, I would feel a bit strange to have a sort of only Eurocentric selection of galleries traveling the world everywhere, without, let's say, including any context.
Because I don't think it's also your curiosity, right? I think your curiosity is far more than that.
Definitely.
Than just having kind of a Eurocentric or Western-centric vision for design in general. Well, what I think is super interesting is in the new world of AI, we're talking about this in some other episodes. I mean, you are the exact antidote to that. I mean, it's all about the experience, right? And I don't see how artificial intelligence would dilute that experience. I mean, I feel like people are more and more gravitating towards that, right? Everything else is kind of being created artificially, and you're really doubling down on a full experience. I mean, it's literally visceral experience, whether it's, feeling it, touching it, eating there, having a full day, as you said earlier. So are you seeing generally a trend that people are gravitating more and more towards those types of experiences because they're almost kind of like trying to find a way to slow down and move away from their phones and from AI and from, all of those kind of manufactured experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we started with the concept of Nomad,
there was no AI at the time, but
no, but also I think it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was a complete different world. And I think there was interest for what Nomad was, but the concept was a bit early, probably. And somehow, after the pandemic, the consumption habits and the idea of interiors and all of this, everything changed post-pandemic.
So you saw a big pre- and post-pandemic?
Completely.
Okay.
It was fundamental also for the collectible design market development and also a concept like Nomad to be more boutique, because there are still people who became almost like agoraphobic, also like this fear of like big masses and to be in big events, that they still kept it after the pandemic, So I think we arrived, we were already there, but I think the Nomad concept was understood better and became even more close to many people after the pandemic.
I have a final question for you. What is a typical day for you? I mean, you are all over the place. Obviously, you have to travel a lot. So you wake up and then what happens? I'm curious.
A good question. I don't even know myself, to be honest.
Well, we know what happened today, but in a typical day, you're waking up, you're having your coffee, and then what happens?
Well, I guess according to where I'm in the world, I check obviously my agenda and mails, and then my journey starts. But normally I'm in a different country or
What, every
city
week?
every week.
Every week. And how much is it kind of fielding interests, emails, calls, whatever, versus engaging with where you are? Like, are you conscious of that and trying to make time, space and time for this?
No, of course. I think obviously most of my work is virtual because my team is also divided in different parts of the world. And so we are constantly in virtual meetings, which is a bit annoying at the same time, because it's not the same experience as being in a real one-to-one meeting. But at the same time, it's a great opportunity to travel. Like this week, I'm in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Next week, I'm in the Hamptons and New York City. And the week after, I'm in St. Moritz, starting to build up for the show. So that's the way it is. But it's great because I can do really site visits and meet the local stakeholders. And at the same time, I have my virtual meetings with my team according to the time zone before, after my day,
Is there any moment where you feel like you want to slow this down and you don't want to be in a different city every week?
I mean, I feel I've been in this sort of routine for the past 15 years. So I don't even, for me, it's not even a weight anymore because I'm used to have my routine. It's really important to keep a balance in all of this, obviously, to eat well and to exercise, and to have a minimum of routine every day that you feel at least that you're balanced in all of this,
But it doesn't bother you. You see that you can continue sort of that lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy also very much this opportunity to travel, and I'm even adding new layers, as you briefly mentioned before. I'm also curating different exhibitions that I take for either nonprofit or to explore new horizons. Like I just had a show in Togo in West Africa last November. I mean, where I flew directly after, basically,
I remember,
Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
So, but it's great because for me, it opens different visions about creativity, and also to engage with different territories. You see also links between different cultures, and you understand better how to put them together, and where to bring attention also to maybe new markets, new talents. And I think, I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to travel and to work with such interesting realities, for sure.
So is there a place you call home?
Good question.
Yeah.
I guess
Home-ish.
Italy. I became Italian by adoption, let's say, because of living
So Milan
there.
feels the closest to home.
I wouldn't say, of course, because Milan is my base in and out, but I don't even feel like that Milan is my city somehow, even if this is the city where I lived the most of my life, basically, because I was, even as a kid in Canada, we were changing city very often. But I feel that I like the idea of Italy because it's in the middle of the Mediterranean and it's so central to everything. And being a Milanese is very interesting because it's not about living in Milan. It's about almost being a nomad, because the Milanese are never in Milan, They are normally in Milan from Monday to Thursday. And
then
every weekend they are either on mountains, the sea, or they go somewhere. And so at the end of the day, you know, your community, you can only see your friends a few days during the week. Otherwise, they're always on the road somewhere, So that's why they're connected to the Milanese culture somehow, because it's a city movement where you always travel and you're somewhere. And now it became also a very global community in the past few years. So it's interesting, as a base, and it's well connected, and, travel-wise for me, it makes sense. But but I feel totally home when I'm here in Dubai. I feel I have so many good friends too, but I feel,
No, it is a very interesting way of living, I have to say. And it's funny because I think as I'm asking you these questions, I think to you, it's so ingrained. But I mean, I'm sure you know that most people, including me, very few people live that life, right? Of literally being somewhere every week, and having so many experiences all at once, and then bringing it together somehow in a unifying form.
Yeah. But at the same time, it becomes just a different scale.
Yeah,
Because I'm
100%.
returning to many places. So, people, because with the project, for example, here in Abu Dhabi, I'm coming every 2 months now. And for many people, they tell me, like, I feel you've been living here because we see each other every 2 months.
You're coming every 2 months because of Nomad, or? That's great. Yeah. No, look, I mean, I cannot tell you how pleased personally I am to have seen the success of Abu Dhabi. I think the region really was ready for it, but it kind of, all the confluences came together in a way. And like you said, I mean, this will be a very interesting year with Art Basel coming, with Freeze, with all of that. And I think there's a lot of excitement.
Yeah, no, I'm very curious, but I think it would be great for sure, like a cultural explosion for sure in the region.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Thank you, Nicolas.
Thanks to you.
Thanks for all the time.